Okay, and like I said, just as broad as, there's no specific topics or anything like that. Just broad family history is kind of the goal. Um, I guess just since it seems to be the most historically um, central, aspect. I guess maybe we just start off by talking about your military career, how you got suckered into the military, and where just some of the highlights of your what you consider to be some of the highlights of your career, and and then we can talk about specific parts later. Just
I can talk about LJ.
oh, of course, yeah, everything. Where do you want to just wherever you want to start, Hey, Molly. Yeah.
You want to try to begin?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
You can talk about like your family, I guess. You want to talk about from there, and then move into professional stuff. Okay.
Say when.
Just yeah, whenever. Right now, it's recording.
Well, I met my wife quite a few years ago when she was 16. We had to wait a while before anything could happen. My wife wanted me to buy an engagement ring shortly after we were dating, which I talked over with my father, and his response was, "Get your feet out from under my kitchen table. There's no way in heck I'm going to provide any support for you or your wife or anything else, so if that's the way you want it, go ahead." Instead, I took what little money I had and bought a motorcycle. Rode that up to her house, and she was furious because I bought a motorcycle instead of an engagement ring. Her sister wasn't mad. She got on the bike and we rode around for quite a while, but not Alan's ring. We continued to date, and she continued to date, not just me, but anybody else she could find. I think she went through the whole Naval Academy and had a good time doing it. Anyway, we finally ended up making up. I went off to the service. I was going to be drafted, and I didn't like that aspect at all during the Korean War, so I decided I would enlist in the Air Force, went to pilot training, and eventually graduated. My mother and her grandmother were supporting this marriage full force. I was a dead duck, I just didn't know it. And we did get married right as soon as I got my pilot's training wings and a grand salary of about $280 a month, I guess. And we were first stationed in Las Vegas, Nevada, where I was supposed to go through advanced gunnery school. And did, and eventually shipped off to Korea. Korea wasn't that bad. I was flying a fighter jet then, actually doing fighter bomber work. And got through that sucker without a scrape. It was not exactly fun, but where creature comforts were concerned, I was well taken care of. I was senior enough so that I had a room of my own, which was pretty good. Finished the war in about I don't know, when did it end, 53, 54, somewhere in there. Came back, and Alexandra and I moved to Chandler, Arizona. We were stationed here, and we had our first child exactly on our second wedding anniversary date, which was 1st of November, 1954. Our first child was born, our daughter Jane. And that all went well. I thought it was the most beautiful baby I'd ever seen. I was convinced that God had sent us an angel. I've learned it's not quite so. nonetheless, the worst part of that birth was her mother coming out to try to help. And she was a drug addict who needed help anyway, so that wasn't much fun, but we finally got rid of her. And my wife felt the same way. Alma Jane felt about the same way about her mother as I did. Anyway, we're plugging along. Here in Chandler for quite a few years. Well, actually about 3 or 4, I guess, and we were assigned to Texas. And we had 2 children here, both Jane and our son John. And we moved to Texas and had a couple more kids. No, we had 1 more kid in Texas, our son Jim. And then, as a result of my going to a management school, I shipped Alma Jane and the 3 kids off to my mother's house. And she stayed up there until the last child was born, our son Joseph. During the midterm of the management school, I went up and brought them back to Alabama, which is where I was. And we were shipped off, we were there for a while, and I was sent to Washington to interview for a sort of an attaché job. Got to Washington and interviewed and found out that I was selected to go to Bolivia. So I called Alma Jane and told her, well, boy, we're going to Bolivia, honey. How do you think about that? Oh boy, she said, that's great, that's wonderful. Where is it? So anyway, we went off to Bolivia and spent about 2.5 years down there. Long enough so that we got back, Jane spoke passable Spanish, and Joe only spoke Spanish. He didn't know he spoke Spanish, but he wanted to show you his shoes. He might say, mire mis zapatos, or he might say, mire mis shoes. Well, as soon as he figured out that nobody else on the block spoke that strange language, he converted to English, and if he couldn't say it in English, he wouldn't say it. Where were we then? Okay, we're in Bolivia. We spent 2.5 years down there. Wasn't too bad at all. We had a housemaid who lived in for $15 a month, and a house cook, a housemaid and caretaker for the kids was another $15 a month, so it wasn't extravagant.
Did you guys get along with them all right? Like, did the family get along with the live-in
maids?
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't live in the same house as us. We had a little cottage out back where the cook stayed with her daughter, and the maid didn't live in the house. She just came by every day. Anyway, Bolivia was a real experience. There were some people that hated it even before they got there, because you didn't have in a grocery store 25 different types of toothpicks. You might have 2 or 3. And you got your meat from a meat market sold in an open air market, or you just brush the flies off and clean it up when you got home. It was, the water wasn't drinkable, so we had to filter and boil that before we could drink it. Partway through the tour I got and electricity was rationed. So they cut off certain sections of the city, rotating, so you would get a turn with no electricity at all. Partway through the tour I found a generator, hooked it up so that I could keep the essential stuff going, like the refrigerator and the freezer and that kind of stuff, and a few lights. From Bolivia we were sent back to, where in San Diego we go after Bolivia? Do you know, Ty?
What year was that?
Oh, that would have been 1965, I think.
So before the
Sent
war.
back Yeah.
Before Hawaii.
We were sent back to Washington.
Oh.
I worked in the Pentagon, which was a great experience. Some days driving to work, I'd wish for a mild cardio, just because I was so tired, and so convinced I would die that day anyway. I may as well have it so I wouldn't have to appear. But I had reasonable success there, and my job was to brief the Chief of Staff of the Air Force before he went down to a joint Chiefs of Staff meeting. Now, the first time I went in that room, I was terrified. The room was filled with generals and a few colonels, and of course the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, a 4-star general. The first time I briefed him, all I did was tell him that a State Department representative was going to visit their meeting that day. That's about all I could say. My knees were shaking so bad. Anyway, that tour turned out to be very educational and, for me, fun.
How'd you get that job?
I'd look for it. Coming out of Bolivia, I didn't have a job. I had made a big mistake coming out of Bolivia. I told the mission commander, who was 2 ranks above me, what an asshole he was, I thought. And he fixed me right up. In my annual performance rating that year, he suggested that I was not ready for promotion. So that was a dumb move. So I finally hitchhiked my way to Panama. And from Panama, by air of course, I hitchhiked my way to Washington. And then I went up and down the halls until I could find somebody I knew, which I did. And I asked them if they had a job in that particular area, which was a good area. That was the job of briefing the Chief of Staff. And I didn't get that job right off, but I got a neighborhood job in the same office, and then moved back to the briefing job. The briefing job was in the rear of the office. Anyway, that job was fun. Hard, tiring, but fun. I never did have a cardiac. I felt like I should have. Moving on, from the Pentagon, I was asked if I didn't want to go to Vietnam like everybody else. You don't want to miss it, do you, Traer? I mean, everybody else is getting a shot at it. Don't you want a shot at it? And I said, oh, sure, let me have a shot at Vietnam. So, they sent me. I hitchhiked my way to Randolph Air Force Base first, where our personnel center is, and told them I'd like to fly an F-100, or a single-engine jet in ground support mission. What have you been flying, Traer? I've been flying propeller-driven airplanes for quite a while. He said, that's what you're going to go to Vietnam in, too, propeller-driven airplane. So back to Washington, sure enough, I got orders to go to Vietnam in a prop job, a C-47, one of the oldest airplanes in the Air Force. Only this one was a gunship, and it had a bunch of Gatling guns, 3 of them, strung out the left-hand side of the airplane, with gunners to man those guns. They were fired by the pilot, and were aimed by the pilot. And that turned out to be a fairly satisfying mission, because you didn't fire unless our troops had troops in contact. Now, if they had enemy in contact, that's when they'd call us in, and we would either drop lights for them. We carried huge, big flares, so they could see, or if they wanted lights and flares, lights and light and guns, we gave them that, or guns alone, whatever they wanted. The guns fired 3,000 rounds a minute on slow fire, 6,000 rounds a minute on fast fire. Tried all 3 guns on, you now had 18,000 rounds a minute. Each 5th round was a tracer, so it was like spitting out fire. You could shoot those things across a football field and put a bullet in every square foot. it's just a lot of little boats. Coming back from Vietnam.
What was sort of a day in the life, like a day, like a typical day in Vietnam? How did you spend
A
it?
typical day for me in Vietnam was, part of it was sleeping, because we only flew all night long. And then you just get up and be bored to death. Sometimes we get up and maybe got a softball game going, or sometimes just relax. I subscribed to Playboy while I was over there, and figured once I had 12 Playboy centerfolds, I'd be home. And so if a Playboy had come in the mail recently, I'd lay around and read that. Or whatever, you know. You ate your meals and did everything during the day. You just kind of reverse your day and night. And it wasn't too bad, because you couldn't sleep all day anyway. Coming back from Vietnam, I asked for a consecutive overseas tour of Europe, anywhere. And they sent me to Hawaii. So I figured out how to get to Hawaii, but I never did figure out how to get to Europe. And I left the service without having served in Europe. In Hawaii, I had a good job. Again, I was on the staff of the Commander-in-Chief Pacific, known as CINCPAC, doing a lot of interesting work involving political military affairs. We, during that period, gave an awful lot of money to the countries in South Asia and the Pacific for military aid. And I worked on those programs, well, for quite a few years. As a matter of fact, we were 5 years in Hawaii, and I did essentially the same thing the whole 5 years. Can't believe we were there. After that, I wanted to go back to the Pentagon, because I liked the work. Nobody else wanted to go to the Pentagon.
Meaning your family. Your family.
Meaning Ella Jane mostly, meaning my wife. She didn't want to go back to the Pentagon and live in Washington or, you know, suburbs. I didn't get it anyway. We were assigned back to, let's see, coming back from the Pentagon. We were assigned right here.
Yeah.
Back in Chandler again. So that was fine. Now what did I do here?
You weren't base commander yet. You weren't base commander yet, right? Or the...
Can you cut that off a second?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, and if you...
From Hawaii, we were all assigned to Denver, where I worked at Lowry Air Force Base. First as a chief of personnel for a year or so, and then I was made base commander, which I served until I retired. As base commander, it's a caretaker kind of job. You know, you make sure the curbs are painted, stripes are in the road, all the sewers work, but you have a lot of miscellaneous responsibility. The chaplains worked for me. The guy who ran the offices at enlisted clubs worked for me. The golf course guy worked for me. The Red Cross guy worked for me. I think I might have said that. And just a whole slug of people, all the miscellaneous services on the base reported to me. And it was a pretty good job. I liked it. Every once in a while, something would fly off the handle and then be an aspect I didn't like. Very well.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Sometimes they'd catch a shoplifter in the basic chains, haul them up to my office, and I would decide their penalty. I'd be barring them from use of the facility again, or something. I remember I got in a dispute with the chief of police was there, who was a lieutenant colonel, and I nailed him. He was stealing. He was creating real disturbance. He had stolen stuff from the officers' club and meat and so on. He had a broad up there who was tougher than nails. Anyway, he reported me to Representative Pat Schroeder as a drunken stumblebum who couldn't manage my little finger. And what was I doing as base commander? Well, Pat Schroeder started an investigation of George Strayer, which went on for weeks. I was investigated by everybody you could think of. Finally, I just bit the bullet and fired that jerk. No notice. Called him in my office, took away his gun and his badge, told him he was out of a job. He marched straight up to the commanding general, who told him he couldn't understand why I hadn't fired him before. So that worked okay. He was a bum, but I was still being investigated. As it turned out, they couldn't prove anything. Prove is a bad word because
It implies.
it implies that I had done something wrong, but I hadn't. But anyway, that finally went away, and I finished my tour as base commander right there at Lowry Air Force Base. That was a pretty good tour. When we got transferred back from Hawaii, Al Jane had been working for United Airlines as a customer service representative, which means that's anything from gate seat check-in to selling tickets across the counter to check-in bags. She applied for a transfer to the Denver office and got it. So she was working in the Denver office actually before I got here. She came back from Hawaii a month before I did. I moved in with some friends of ours who took really good care of her until I got back. Our next concern I was coming up on retirement. They asked me to stay another year. And I said, have you got a contract I can sign that you won't transfer me during that year and I'll end up right here for the next year? Well, we can't do that, George. Okay, I'm retiring. And I did. And after retirement, we stayed there in Denver for a while where I got a job with a bank. I thought banks would be lifetime employment. And I moved comfortably up the ladder in the bank to vice president in about a year and a half, whatever. And enjoyed the work. I was not in banking per se. I was in all the service agencies that support banking. And everything except personnel and the marketing. enjoyed that job and had a lot of support from my boss in the job I had, which was mainly facility management of our building and bank, and also the other 16 or 17 banks in the group. So it was a good job. We got to travel a little bit, and which is to say I got to drive around the state a little bit. And got to go to school in Michigan, and as facility manager, I became the boss's little favorite because it's something he could play with. So we would fly up to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and look at furniture, what kind of chairs we want to buy, and that was a good job. The representatives of those organizations would fly us up there in their private jets. That was pretty nice. Anyway, I stayed around in the bank for about 10 years, feeling very secure, until a bank from Minnesota bought us out. And slowly we were all asked to leave. I lasted about a year after that, and I was asked to leave. Which I did, of course. At that point I was really upset, because they sent a guy down from the Michigan bank to take over my job. I thought, damn him, or damn those guys. He's got my desk, my office, my duties and functions, the same people that work for me, and they're using my chair. Damn it, there's got to be something wrong with this. So I marched off to the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission to find out what my recourse was. I said, sit down and write it, write it up. Tell us what you think is wrong. And I did. I fought that sucker for a while, and they assigned somebody to investigate my allegations. I might have stepped on my own foot there, or shot myself in the foot one way along the way. I remember when I was dealing with the Equal Opportunity Commission employment investigator, a woman, a very nice lady actually. I referred to a woman as a broad. Big mistake. Eventually I got a letter back from the United States government. Told me I was fired, that's all there was to it, goodbye. Okay. But I can make a mistake in almost everything I try. So where was this? Shut the phone for a second.
Yeah.
When I left my job at the bank, I, along with 3 other distinguished members of the bank, all senior, were named in an article at the front page of the local paper, saying that Central Bank relieves 3 more senior officers. Well, as it happens, the guy that I was in the service with saw that article and called me and said, George, would you have lunch with me? Maybe we can, something to talk about. I said, okay, sure, you buying? Yeah. I said, okay, I'll meet you, Dan, wherever you want to go. So I met him, and we had a couple of martinis to start the lunch. And after that, he said, George, I think I got a job for you. Why don't you come down and work with me? I can't pay you a whole lot, but I'll start you at about 50. For me, that was a whole lot of money. I don't know how it is to most people. That was a whole lot of money, especially on top of my retirement pay. So I had 2 salaries there for a while. When do you want me to start, Dan? He said, I'd like you to start as soon as you can, maybe February. I said, okay, I'll see what I say at the bank, if I can leave that early. I got back to the bank and talked to the president of the bank about leaving. He said, absolutely you can leave. Get your butt out of here now, if you want to. So the bank paid me until May, through May, and but they didn't necessarily want me around. So I went down there and worked for him as a contract administrator. I didn't, what the job, the company provided emergency backup service for computers in financial institutions primarily. All financial institutions have to have a backup system for their banking transactions. And we provided that on an emergency basis for anybody that lost their computer system. And we practiced all the time so that company A could ship their tapes into our system, we'd load them on our system and run them on our system there in that building. And then they'd run it and balance out real time and then go back home. And one company after another would march in with their tapes to load them on our machines and then see if it all worked well. And it usually worked very well. So reasonably successful. I guess I hung around there for about 5 years, and I turned 65 and I was asked to leave, and by golly I did. On the 30th day of June, which was the same birthday as one of our grandchildren. I thought, that's nice. One life ending and another life beginning on the same day. Wow. Well, that was retirement after that. I didn't know what to do. I have a trunk at the foot of my bed. And I used to come home and sit on that and figure out what I wanted to do for the day. Well, for about a year, I did a lot of little things that my wife had piled up that she thought needed to be done, like painting, and I don't know what else, wallpapering, which we put up upside down. And I don't know what all, but about a year's worth of tasks, moving slow, not caring much, going out to lunch and seeing a movie, not infrequently, if it was anything worth seeing. My favorite lunch was a restaurant called Armadillo, which was a Mexican restaurant. Go up there and have a, what do you call it, tequila?
Margarita.
Margarita. Have a margarita or two, then have lunch, and then maybe go to a movie. Well, it was great. Well, that was a ridiculous life. Oh, wow.
Why was that ridiculous?
It was so easy, so fun. Wasn't worth anything. I didn't contribute to anybody or anything. Wasn't making anything, wasn't doing anything. I was just lounging around with Ellen Jane.
Hard earned though.
Huh, maybe so. Oh well, what do we do after that? I don't think we did anything.
How did you do you want to talk about since we're on the topic, do you want to talk about how you met your wife and where and how old and how you wooed her and won her and all that kind of stuff. So I know there's some interesting history there.
Well, we're going to go back for a minute.
Yeah, quite a bit, quite a ways.
We're going to go back quite a ways to when I first met Alma Jane. I met her when she was 16 and bought her a little bracelet with my initials on one side and her initials on the other. Not too long after that, we ended up with some other couples at a hotel in Washington, D.C. for dinner and dancing. She was not my date. She was my cousin's date. Anyway, she said from that moment on, I was hers. Love at first sight. Wasn't a bad deal. She's a beautiful girl. Well, I decided I'd try to horn in there. I don't know who she was afraid of dating frequently or infrequently, but I decided I'd call her, see if I could get a date. And I did. The trouble is she set a date with another guy. I said, give me a break. You have a date with another guy? What's his name? What's his phone number? So I called him. Can't think of his name now. But I called him. I said, hey, I'm only in town here for a day or two. I need a date and I'd like to take Alma Jane out. Would you back off? And the dumb sucker backed off. I don't know how long I talked to him, but he finally said, okay. And I picked up Alma Jane. We were on a date. Had a date. I think his name was Jimmy. I'm not sure. Jimmy Pinkerton? That might be right. Anyway, he was in a car parked across the street when I got there. And Alma Jane and I waltzed off for a nice evening. I had a great evening. As a matter of fact, we went to Washington quite frequently to dance and have a couple of drinks. Fun times.
And her parents liked you?
I got along real well with her parents, especially with her grandmother, and especially with, well, my mother. Both my mother and her grandmother were in favor of a marriage. So I guess I was a dead. I got along all right with her father too, but he was an asshole. And her mother was a genuine bitch. They lived in a cul-de-sac, and I remember one night I played the radio so long I ran out the battery, the camp I was at. And I couldn't, it was a slight incline, and I couldn't push it up myself. So I knocked on the door, and Alma Jane knocked the door, went in the house. Of course, her mother was on, Alma Jane, is that you? Yes. What's the matter? George's car is stuck down here, he can't get it up the hill. So she came out and helped me push the car over the hill, and I had a downhill ride from there almost to my home. I don't remember how I got the full thing in the garage. It wouldn't start. It was an automatic shift, and it was hard to start an automatic shift by rolling. Anyway, her mother and I had a fairly poor relationship with each other. I don't think it's anything either one of us did. We were just opposites, I guess. I remember she came out to see us after Jane was born, and the only furniture we had was an army cot, which we set up in the extra bedroom we had. When she got off the bus coming out here, Alma Jane didn't even recognize us. She was such a wreck. At any rate, she was bellowing for some water or something to drink. And Alma Jane would get up and get her a glass of water and take her into this room where Nanette was her name, was staying, and give her a glass of water. She dropped it on a concrete floor, which of course Alma Jane had to clean up. She did that twice. The next time Alma Jane bought her a drink of water in a tin cup, an aluminum cup. That really set her off. That she had to be denigrated like that to have to drink out of a aluminum cup. Anyway. Alma Jane and I had some great times. Once when we were in Hawaii, we were escorted off the floor of the Royal Hawaiian Hotel for dancing a little too close. A lot too close. When we staggered out of the place, went down to the beach, climbed over a wall, and continued our padding in a rather vigorous fashion. And I looked up, and here was a guy sitting on the wall, not 3 feet or 4 feet away from us, watching everything. He moved as soon as I started to get up. No, he ran. But you got to do foolish things sometimes. Oh, well. Sometimes Alma Jane would ride around Hawaii, playing games, kissing, petting. Sometimes she'd get totally undressed and be stark naked in the car while we were driving around. Happily, we never got caught. But we sure had a good time.
And you were in the hospital when you were younger, when you guys were first dating, or early in your dating? You ended up in the hospital for something?
Yeah.
And she didn't help your recovery process?
Not at all. Well, you want me to tell about that? Before I was accepted in the Air Force, they discovered I had a hernia. And they wanted to have the hernia fixed before I joined the Air Force, or before I'd be eligible. So my father paid for a hernia operation, which in those days was considered a fairly serious operation. I had 2 friends that lived down the block who were in the funeral business. So I had 2 things going for me in that hospital room. Lots of flowers, because these were buddies of mine in high school, you know. They'd be off to a funeral somewhere and drop off a whole slug of flowers. I had more flowers than anybody in the hospital. He said, "They'll never know, don't worry. We'll just give them to you." And then Alma Jane would come up frequently to say hi and kiss and whatever. And we'd neck there. And I'm sorry, but I got the nut so badly with Alma Jane visiting, I could hardly stand it. I finally got my mother to bring me a jock strap. That didn't help either. While the company was pleasurable, it was also painful. Oh, what a time we had.
What was I going to say? I can't remember. I had another question. So what about college? You ended up you decided not to go to college, to go to the Air Force instead, and then how did you end up graduating from college eventually?
Yeah, I went to college. I started at age 17, right out of high school. I went to 3 years at VPI, Virginia Polytechnic. It was a military school at the time, wore a uniform. Everything was great, except I flunked out at the end of my, halfway through my junior year. I got back in after petitioning to the dean. I got back in to finish my junior year. At the end of the junior year, the daggone Korean War had started. Have we been through this?
Briefly, but I just wanted to talk about. I just wanted you to talk about just some of your college experiences. You know, even in, like, how did you end up graduating from college?
Going back here.
Yeah.
I transferred. Anyway, college was fun, sort of. That's where I learned to shoot pool from a guy named Hollis Ergenbright. He came from a little dinky town in Virginia. But boy, could he shoot pool. And boy, did I spend a lot of money learning. Nothing in life is free. So the money I should have been spending on a coat or breakfast or whatever, I was given to Hollis to teach me to play pool. I eventually got to be a pretty good pool player. No, a real good pool player, as a matter of fact. Enough so that I was finally ready to bet money on my pool game, and did.
Won some of it back that you spent on learning?
Huh?
Won some of it back, the money you spent on learning back?
I don't know if I've won much back. I lost more than I won, I can tell you that.
What I remember one time you told me a story about like some of the three of the most like just three of the most masculine guys, like manly men you've ever known. And one of them was named Clarence something or other. And there's a couple others. What would you mind talking about some of those guys and your relationship with them?
Sure, I can only think of two of them right now.
Yeah, I can't remember. There may have just been two.
When I met Alma Jane, her next door neighbor was a fellow named Clarence Sproul. Clarence was one of the most manly men I've ever met, and extremely talented. Clarence rented a barn not up the hill from where he lived to store his toys in. Now his toys were things like a place to make sails, a place to make his own rope, a place to bore his own gun. He did all of that. He installed a heat exchanger in his house, and then tracked the electricity coming to the house, and finally called the city to task for not keeping the electricity flow within required limits, and made him change it. But he was just not satisfied. Clarence made his own bow, made his own arrows. I tried to build like one of his compound bows, and I couldn't even move it. But he did very well with his toys. As I say, if he needed rope, he made rope. He wanted a truck, so he bought a fire engine, sold everything off of it, and then had the rest of it for his, as a truck he wanted to have. He did deep sea diving in an old diving suit, kind of with a big bell helmet on it, you know, just screwed down. And we take his wife out in a rowboat and go off the side of that rowboat and tell her, if you don't keep cranking that air pump, you're going to be stuck out here forever. So it'd be a good idea to keep air coming my way, okay? And she'd go out there until she could hardly move. She didn't want to be anchored in the middle of Chesapeake Bay either. But he wanted to see what was down there. Funny guy. A real macho man. One time, she needed dental work, his wife, and she was afraid to go. So he bought a dental chair and dental tools and brought them home. And said, now you're either going to the dentist or I'm going to do it. One or the other, you have your choice. She went to the dentist. But the guy could do anything, and it was just a pleasure to be around. He had, when I was in the last part of my flying training, he flew out to see me. And it was just wearing plain ordinary civilian clothes and a knit that was see-through t-shirt. And he picked up an airplane, a T-33 from California, that the Air Force had given to him. And a letter from Nathan Twining, the Commander-in-Chief of the Air Force, signed by him personally, that this guy was to have an airplane and we would pay for it and refuel it and we'll take care of it for him. I guess the old other thing I didn't say is that he was the inventor of the ground control approach system that the Air Force used, which is used today all over the world. As a matter of fact, he went to Korea to show him how it's to be used and check on the installation of these called GCA units and the ground control approach, and ended up flying like 47 missions over there. Just bulldogged his way into having to load his airplane with both. He wanted to see what flying was like, so he also flew combat missions over there. This is a great guy. He's gone now. Another man's man, whose friendship I really appreciated. I appreciate his friendship, the second guy's friendship more than Clarence. His name was Bob Ward. Now, Bob Ward was one of these guys who also could do anything he wanted to do, but did different things. He didn't build a truck, he built an airplane, for instance. At one point after he retired. And he could fix anything. I was happy to consider my friend. He would jog up every once in a while. One morning, shortly after we were out of the Air Force, he jogged up to the house and said, "George, when are you going to clean up your basement?" I said, "Well, I'll get around to it someday, I guess." He said, "Let's start right now. Get in your car, get your checkbook, and let's get in the car. We're going to go buy some wood." Went down and bought a raft of 2x4s and a raft of 3/4-inch plywood. And we started building shelves all around the perimeter of the basement, up into the studs. An elephant leaned on it, wouldn't phase them. Then picked all this crap off the floor, most of it, and put it on those shelves. It was the nicest thing that ever happened to me. At the same time, the bank was recarpeting some areas, and in carpet squares at about 18 inches or 24-inch carpet squares. When they started throwing them out, I started taking them home. Pretty soon I had enough to cover the whole basement floor. The basement isn't a basement if you have a carpet on it. Doesn't feel like it anyway. So that was nice. I learned how to cut tile then. That's not as easy as you think. But at any rate, I had plenty of tile workers down at the bank I could show, or who could show me. And that worked out neatly. Bob could fix anything and do anything also with different kinds of things. He made everything from wallets, purses. He fixed clocks. He did a lot of photography. Developed his own color film. Made color prints. If he just had a hankering to do something, he could do it, and did it. It was really neat. I never had such talents as either one of those men, or such drive as either one of those men. Used to do a lot of fishing with Bob Ward. That was fun. One time we were up fishing on a lake not too far away. This was out of Denver. We took Joe with us, who also liked to fish. Bob and I were down on Lakeside fishing, and Joe was hiking up in the back woods behind us. I'm not sure what for. I suspect he had to take a leak also. But anyway, he and a couple other guys got this tree bent over. They just pulled it back and pulled it back and pulled it back. Joe was the jerk who got on it to see if it worked like a slingshot. It did. It threw him, pitched him probably 10 or 12 feet. He was all beat up, came back down. You know, not cuts or bruises, just scrapes, bruises. Oh, Lord. What a neat guy. I love that man. After he retired, he decided he was going to build his own airplane. And he did. He started with the frame and did that all himself. He found an engine in another state which his mother bought for him. You know, a used engine. Found some wings somewhere and stored those in his living room until he finished building the rest of the airplane. I can't tell you that made his wife overly happy, but nonetheless she was used to just whatever Bob was going to do, and that's where she best will just roll with it. He finished the airplane, by golly, put in an extra gas tank where a passenger would normally sit. Instead of a two-seater airplane, it was a one-seater with a gas tank, an extra gas tank where the passenger would sit. Eventually he got it all assembled, hauled it out to a private airfield, put the wings on it out there, put the engine in it, tested the engine, got a certification from a A&E mechanic, aircraft engineering mechanic, that the thing was solid. Got an approval report from AA, whoever, FAA, whoever approves airplane experimental, that's what you have to call his. I went out there and flew it, grinning from ear to ear. Went around the pattern 2 or 3 times, did a couple of touch and goes, landed. I had a video camera, and then I videotaped it for him. He thought that was great. Well, he kept it out there a few times. One day he got a hair of his butt and he wanted to fly to California to show some friends. So, the night before he packed up a pretty healthy lunch. I can only imagine it because, among other things, he had tried was making bread. And I'm sure the bread had to weigh 1/4 pound a slice. Big, healthy bread, you would call it, full of grains and dark. Anyway, he got up in the morning, went out to get his airplane, all fueled up, took off with enough fuel and enough lunch to get to California to show his friends. And he never made it. He was missing along his flight plan for a few hours, I guess 3 or 4 hours, maybe more. Couldn't find him. He had turned the airplane around and was trying to get back to Denver. And he couldn't quite make it. He had a heart attack, and the damn airplane went in nose first, straight in. Found the airplane with the search mission. Found the airplane. course, he wasn't just dead, he was crushed. But he was a hard-headed son of a gun. He was going to say it, he was going to do it, he was going to do it. Not a very fun day.
That's how he died?
That's how he died. 57 years old. He was a year older than I was at that time. Maybe he was 58 and I was 57, I don't know. That's how he died. In an airplane, straight in the ground.
Wow.
Yeah. Wasn't anything wrong with the airplane. This ticker quit. So that's how he died.
Amazing.
Yep.